Welcome to the European Parliament in Brussels for this new edition of Talking Europe. The last 2 weeks have seen major breakthroughs in the handling of the Eurozone debt crisis. The heat seems off for the moment, but EU leaders know there's no time to relax. I will soon be joined by a Dutch and a Greek MEP. Together we'll assess the situation. And in the second part of Talking Europe, I'll talk to Bernard Cazeneuve, France's European Affairs Minister, who will lay out the vision of François Hollande for Europe. It will also tell me why, according to several polls, the French public has fallen out of love with Europe. But as always, let's start on our set here at the European Parliament. An ambitious bond-buying program from the European Central Bank. The green light from Germany to activate Europe's rescue funds, a pro-European victory in the Dutch election, and a tentative deal to give Greece more time to complete its reforms. Could there be at last light at the end of the tunnel for the troubled Eurozone? This is the question I will put to my two guests, starting to my right with Marietje Schaake. Welcome to our program. You're a Dutch MEP from the Alliance of Liberals and Democrats. At home you belong to the D66, which is a pro-European Liberal party. Also on this set, Dimitrios Droutsas. You are a Greek MEP from the Alliance of Socialists and Democrats. I add that you served as foreign minister in the Greek government from 2010 till 2011. Welcome to Talking Europe.
Good to see you.
We'll start with this announcement by the ECB that will act as a sort of lender of last resort, buy Italian and Spanish debt in order to try and bring down the borrowing costs of those countries. Marietje Schaake, is this the signal that the markets were expecting to say, look, we are really serious about the future of the euro, we will do everything we can to preserve the currency?
Well, the stability on the markets is of course very important. But the other side of this story is of course that the political leadership in coming up with solutions is lagging behind. And I think that that is something that we really need to emphasize as well. Stability is important, but political leadership is as well. And that is also what Draghi has called for, to take more political initiatives and take institutional steps towards a banking union, for example.
Mr. Droutsas, what is your view? Is this what you were expecting from the central bank, this strong message that we will stick behind the currency and change the role of the ECB? Because it wasn't originally the role of the ECB to buy debt on the markets.
I think it was a long-awaited, strong message also by the European Central Bank, a much-needed message for the stability of the euro. But let me also say that my feeling is we had to wait a bit too long for this message. If we had received this message some time ago, some months ago, maybe a year, 1.5 years ago, I have the feeling that we could have avoided these very critical moments we have witnessed in the past weeks and months. So it is a very important message, but my feeling is, in order also to conclude with what my colleague said, we lack political leadership, and this is why we are facing those kind of crises.
When you say we lack political leadership, what is it exactly that you imply? What is lacking?
Well, I'm still in the mood of the Dutch elections, where we once again saw that the story that politicians tell at home is often focused on the short term, on the domestic political gains, and there's a lack of taking political leadership and responsibility in sketching the long-term solutions and the difficult decisions that have to be made, not only to solve our immediate problems, but also to take a responsible step for next generations. I think that's very important to emphasize. We all need to make painful and difficult reforms in our pension systems, in our housing markets, in our labor markets, but it is because we need sustainable solutions. And I think the short-term gains and the political gains are often taking the upper hand on the part of politicians, and this needs to end. And a more pro-European and a more collective responsibility for where we're going as a European Union in the world is very important.
referring to what Marietje was saying, this lack of leadership, I guess this is something you see in Greece as well at the moment.
No, definitely. And if I may remind you of another very interesting debate we had here in your TV show in France 24, when I said that unfortunately the political agenda is set by the populists, by those who are at the edge of the political spectrum, because the political leadership in our countries, unfortunately, does not dare to take those kind of decisions that are necessary. The political agenda is driven by what are our next elections, what do the polls say, what do the media say, and this is very short-sighted. And this is why I fully agree with that political leadership means we have to dare to say what is right also for the future, also for the next generations. Not looking only for the day after, but looking ahead.
Well, let's look precisely at the results of the Dutch elections, which were very interesting because most polls had predicted big gains for Eurosceptic parties, such as the party of Mr. Wilders. That's not what really happened. You saw that the party of Mark Rutte, the Liberal Party, and the Labour Party came first. How do you explain the fact that, against all the odds, the Dutch decided to endorse pro-European parties?
Well, pro-European is a little bit too soon to conclude. At least the Eurosceptics...
Traditional parties, let's call them this.
Yes, well, middle parties. The Eurosceptics didn't win as much as was anticipated in the polls, but it reminds us that polls don't say anything. It only matters what happens on election day. The question is now, of course, what are these two parties that won so much? My party also won, and we were the only three parties that won in the elections. But what are the two main winners of these elections going to do with the responsibility in their hands, especially vis-à-vis Europe? And it is also clear that their campaign, which was indeed competing with the more populist voices on both the left and the right, but equally Eurosceptic, that their rhetoric in the campaign wasn't as pro-European. And now the question is, what will they do when in a position of responsibility? And I can only hope that they will dare to take political leadership now that the rhetoric and the election season is behind us, and that they will indeed emphasize the importance of Europe and take a leading role. Our country used to be well known for its international ambitions, our openness. We're an export economy, so it's in our own interest to position ourselves in an open and collaborative relationship, an ambitious position in Europe. And we've lost that during the past government. I think that is very damaging and regrettable. And I think now is the moment for those who have received the trust by the voters to take responsibility. To take responsibility.
Were you surprised by the very poor showing of Mr. Wilders, who really campaigned on a Eurosceptic platform?
I was surprised, but very positively surprised, if I may add so, because his campaign was also on the shoulders of, if you want, of Greece in a very populist way. But this is another chapter. It was a very interesting analysis, I think, about the electoral result in the Netherlands. But I think for Europe, the most important thing, to make it a little bit more, to simplify it a little bit, that the Dutch people gave this message that we put aside with Euroscepticism, we put aside with populism, which is much more important, and we look in a pro-European attitude to the future. I think this is a very, very important message that came out from the elections in the Netherlands.
Well, but the proof will be in the policy and the commitment, and I certainly hope that this will be the line.
Certainly, I don't want to interfere into Dutch politics, but I think the message that we in Europe got from that was in a simplified manner again, that here again we are against populism. Populism is not the right way. We stick to the serious voices that want to work for the future of Europe.
Well, let's move now to the fiscal treaty, which has already been ratified by 9 Eurozone countries. It's now France's turn. As you will see, François Hollande is facing a sort of backbench rebellion within his own socialist party, with some socialist MPs unwilling to ratify the treaty. Let's watch our report.
Europe was the guest of honor at the cabinet meeting on Wednesday. French ministers kick-started the ratification of an EU budget discipline pact. The text still needs to be adopted in Parliament. Prime Minister Jean-Marc Ayrault called for unity.
My goal, and that of the government, is to convince the largest number of members of Parliament, including those who are still hesitating, to take their responsibilities. This will reinforce the position of France so that it is heard more.
Not all of the left supports the treaty, since it was negotiated by former French President Nicolas Sarkozy. Opponents say it will impose austerity. According to the fiscal pact, a new financial watchdog panel will oversee government forecasts. The treaty's main innovation is a so-called golden rule, which requires governments to limit structural deficits to 0.5% of GDP. French ministers say this doesn't mean France is losing its sovereignty.
We are not putting in place some rule that's written in stone or puts us in a straitjacket. On the contrary, this is a series of rules and precise procedures that allow us to respect a notion that we are committed to, being serious about our budget.
The pact will be submitted to Parliament in October. Thanks to votes from the right, it's expected to be adopted without much difficulty.
Marietje Schaake, the Prime Minister, insists it's part of the solutions to stabilise the Eurozone, but some left-wing MPs in France are very sceptical. They say the problem is if we sign this document, it means we will surrender to the camp of austerity embodied by Angela Merkel. What would you reply to this?
Well, it's also signing up for building trust in the markets, but also in terms of what a commitment by political leadership is worth. And I think it's fascinating to see what is happening in France, and perhaps will spell the next steps in the Netherlands as well, because indeed the left was campaigning against these binding commitments, and Mr. Hollande, at least now, is willing to commit to it. And the same we saw in the Netherlands with the Socialist Party, the Social Democratic Party, that were saying, no, we are unwilling to take on these binding measures. They were also not a part of the parliamentary coalition that came up with budget cuts for the next year that were necessary for our European commitments. So I think it could well be that our Labour Party will now switch when they have to take responsibility. And I think the outcome of that is good, but it's not good for the trust in political leaders if they deep down, based on solid analysis, know what needs to happen, but are unwilling to pave the way and to put a point on the horizon and bring voters along. I think it doesn't help the trust in political leadership, and that has a bigger fallout than only on a national level. It impacts the trust in the Eurozone, it impacts the trust in EU political leadership, and that needs to change.
Mr. Droet says this fiscal pact, the golden rule, which will cap the structural deficit at 0.5%, is it really what we need in time of looming recession?
You're asking, of course, a representative of a country that is very much suffering from those kind of ideas. Let me be clear, austerity and consolidated budgets, all of that, of course, is necessary. But we must not lose the right balance. It must always be the right recipe. What can a country and the people, a nation, really afford to do? And there I have the feeling that in the past we did not really find the right balance. Regarding the situation in France, if I may just say a word, I understand that François Hollande is now under some pressure regarding those developments. But let me say that it was the election of François Hollande that really made a turning point in the discussion and maybe also in the attitude that was prevailing in Europe. Suddenly the word growth, investment into growth, became something more than just words. And I think this is something we have to attribute to François Hollande, although I understand that he is facing quite some domestic problems now with
backbench rebellion there in the French Parliament. And let's finish with Greece. The new mantra is no more money, but cheaper interest rates and more time. Do you think that Greece deserves more time to complete its reforms? I added the Troika of international observers, of course, in Greece at the moment, and will soon publish its report.
Well, to make sure that Greece stays on board, meets the reforms and stays in the Eurozone is of a huge interest for all of us. And I think that it's important that we go quite far to make that happen. But it's also important to be strict. Commitments that are made and asked of Greece will also have an impact on expectations of different countries that are now facing similar problems. So I think it is important to keep Greece on board, and if there can be trust in the seriousness and the feasibility of reforms and budget cuts that are made, then we have to be flexible, but with the goal in mind to keep the Eurozone together and to find sustainable solutions.
It's all a matter of trust, we hear. Is Greece, is the Greek government of Mr. Samaras serious about the reforms?
Let me be very clear and open about that. Personally, I'm not a friend of this government, of this prime minister. For one reason, we all know what the behavior was, the attitude was of this government when they were in opposition. They were opposing all the reforms that the previous government of Prime Minister Yorgos Papandreou was trying to do. But, there is this big but. I'm very well aware of the fact that Greece was given a last chance, a very last chance. And this is the government, this is the Prime Minister who has to take advantage of this chance. And this is why we all have to support this government, and this is why I'm saying a very clear yes, this government is serious about reforms, and you will see very, very soon the right results. I think we will see a success story in Greece.
Well, we'll be following this, of course, as the Troika is due to deliver its report. Marietje Schaake, Dimitrios Troutsas, thank you very much for taking part in the first part of Talking Europe. Please stay with us. We'll return after the news break. We'll bring you a close-up interview with Bernard Cazeneuve, the French minister in charge of European affairs. We'll ask him why French people have fallen out of love with Europe.